So please help me welcome Kathie Baptista.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank Creative Mornings for hosting this event, Credo Conduit for hosting us, for having us, and all of our sponsors, as well as Sticker Print Go for the wonderful stickers. If you'd like to have some stickers, we have some here at the table. I really want to thank everyone just for letting me be here and sharing my story. So just a quick little introduction. I'm Kathie Baptista. I am the founder and creative director of Kathie Baptista Creative Studio, or KBCS for short. We are a brand and design studio that creates bold and unique brand identities and websites for creative businesses and entrepreneurs. As far as a little bit about my style, I've always been a sucker for typography. I've always been really drawn to colorful and eye-catching just designs. I draw a lot of inspiration from retro designs like classic movie posters, psychedelic posters, matchbook covers, vintage packaging. I've always just really been drawn to this type of design style and art, which makes me a really fun person to travel with because I'm always taking pictures of signage, art, anything that I see in the wild. I would say it does play a really big role in how I like to design. I would describe my design style as very vibrant. I like to incorporate typography whenever I can and really just use striking color palettes that really draw the eye. And I like to take my inspiration, a lot of the references that I've kept, to be able to reimagine them into something new. But before I get into a lot of my work, I do want to go a little bit into my background. So this is my family. My family, it's funny because I label my family kind of like BC and AD, before Kathie and after Kathie, because I feel like I really made such an impact. But this is my family before I came along. They immigrated to the United States from Nicaragua in the 80s. My dad was an electrician. My mom, she worked in the food service industry and the healthcare industry. And they moved to Miami, Florida, and fortunately the community was very Hispanic. It was 95% Hispanics, to be specific. So I would say the transition was a little easier. You know, Miami itself has a very diverse Latin American culture, and almost everybody kind of speaks Spanish. So it really helped them transition from one country to another a little bit easier. I myself, was born in the 90s. I was the youngest of three, and when I arrived, I was instantly the center of attention. I brought new life to my family, and I was kind of like a new doll for my sisters. But being a true 90s and 2000s baby, it's easy to see where the attraction to vibrancy kind of came about. I listened to Spice Girls like crazy. I loved Aqua and Bewitched, and I just overall loved the girl power movement of the 90s. I also was obsessed with the Powerpuff Girls, and I just love their mid-century quirky illustration style. And I loved Sailor Moon. I just loved the colorful, dreamy, ethereal style of the anime, and I was always really drawn to the graphics. So I was always a creative kid growing up. As you can see, I was working on quite the masterpiece here. And my mom really took note of that when I first started, or when I was first starting with being creative. So she always made sure to put me in some kind of creative classes, whether it was art club or choir, or I was in painting classes, or even doing sculpture. So that really allowed me to use art to be able to not just entertain myself, but also be able to express myself and be able to explore my skill sets a little bit more. Once I was in high school, I really started to develop an interest in photography. And I was really exploring with Photoshop at the time, just kind of like editing my pictures a lot. When I was in high school, this little thing called MySpace kind of became a thing. And I was obsessed with really like curating my profile, making all the color palettes in the profile coordinate with a specific vibe or mood or theme or something, adding the perfect song, and kind of just doing everything to really curate my profile to be like me. This is one of my profile photos that I had at the time. And I really just loved being able to add filters to images and add graphics, and I would do that for all of my friends. I was literally a 14-year-old trying to figure out code for the first time and successfully doing it. So I really do thank MySpace for starting my career. I would say one of the first things I ever designed, like fully, I would say, was probably my quinceañera invitation. I'm not sure how I got the borders to bleed to the edge. I don't even know. I mean, I didn't know what bleeds were, much less margins, obviously. And I probably stole that picture from some pixelated Google search or whatever, but I was so proud of it because it was very unique, it was different, and I had done it for myself, and I was able to create this like custom experience for my guests at my quinceañera when they first arrived. So when the time came for me to start thinking about what I wanted to do when I was in college, I knew that I wanted to pursue a creative career. So I met with an advisor at the time who suggested that because of my interest in photography and editing pictures and messing around with MySpace, that I should probably consider graphic design. So I did 2 years at my local college in Miami-Dade, and then in 2011 I transferred to UCF. I keep pressing the wrong button. But here we have the lovely UCF graphic design class of 2014. You can see Victor here in the front. And this was... I wish I could, but I would say really when I was in college, that's when I really started to dive really deep into design. I started to really get involved in my community. I started attending events. I started going to conferences, and I was a part of the AIGA mentorship program. I volunteered for AIGA, and I also started working on campus. I worked at Career Services, just doing brochures and flyers, and then eventually I moved over to the student union where I was working more on campaigns. But I was finding a bit of an interest in hand lettering. So I started to explore that a little bit more, and I was very fortunate that my boss at the time really allowed me to be able to experiment with hand lettering with all of the projects that we had at work. So I would say that by the time I graduated, I really was just exploring a lot with hand lettering. I had this interest in paper and stationery and print. So I knew that when I graduated, I wanted to pursue roles that involved paper, print, stationery, lettering in some capacity. When I graduated, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and my first jobs were pretty much just that. My first job was actually designing and assembling wedding invitations. I then worked at a screen printing shop, designing t-shirts for local businesses and posters for local bands and events. I also worked at Shutterfly, and I was just working on cards, invitations, stationery, announcements, holiday greetings, and it really was a fun time to just really explore and figure out what I wanted to do. I also, during this time, started freelancing. And the way that I started that was that I just kind of sent out a bunch of cold emails to businesses nearby, just letting them know that I'm new in town and that I would love an opportunity to be able to work with them. And some people did not respond. Some people did respond and were like, hey, thanks for letting us know, but we don't have anything for you right now. But there were some that did have something for me. And one of those was Charlotte Magazine. So they had reached out because they needed hand lettering and illustrations for an upcoming article. They sent me the email first getting in contact, and they said they needed it in 12 days, which right now I'd be like, great, I'd get it to you in 10. But at the time I was like, 12 days? Are you kidding me? In school I had 3 months to do things. Like, how are you gonna tell me I have 12 days? But I made it work, and it really was just such a great experience. I really got to learn, it was a great first freelance project because I got to learn a lot about Charlotte, and I had just moved to the city, so it was really fun to be able to learn more about the city and create all these like fun typography and illustration pieces. I got to be on the cover, and I got to be featured, so it was always really cool to be able to see this project in the wild. Another project, or another one of those cold emails that winded up working out, was a cold email to a local agency in Charlotte. They had actually let me know that they had a project on board where they were going to redesign the labels for this juice company called Natalie's Orchid Island Juice Company. And it was funny because at the time they were like, yeah, they're really popular in this store called Publix. And I was like, the Publix, because I couldn't believe that was like, they didn't know about it. There was no Publix at the time in North Carolina. So I was like, yeah, I'm a Florida girl, of course, sign me up. Like, I'd love to do this. But they really wanted to modernize the packaging and just really make it more playful and engaging for their audience. So it was really cool because I was able to really work with the team to kind of decide on the direction and the overall look of all the labels. I really spearheaded a lot of the typography and the lettering. I did all the lettering for all of the different flavors. And it was really surreal to see it all kind of come to life. I mean, even to this day, when I see the bottles in the stores, I can't believe that I did it, and it's kind of weird, but it's pretty cool that something I made is still out there and exists in the wild. Another project that actually winded up coming about wasn't from a cold call email. It was just, I'm not sure even how they found me, but it was for Google Fiber. They were opening up their first location in Charlotte, North Carolina, and to promote the opening of this new location, they reached out to myself and a couple of other artists to create a graphic for their van design. And this was going to be a van that was going to be kind of used to promote the opening of the location, as well as for future technicians to be able to provide service. So I created a design, but unfortunately it wasn't selected. However, they did really love the design, and they wanted to be able to repurpose it for a mural in the new space that was coming about. So we did go ahead and we made a couple of minor tweaks, really just adjusting the graphics so that it worked well in the space. And it was really cool because I had a couple friends who did murals, and I was able to get them on board for this project. And they were able to do a really cool time-lapse video for me. But it was a great experience because I feel like even though I don't live there anymore, a little piece of me kind of still lives there and exists. So it's kind of nice that hopefully I will always have that to come back to, and I can always visit the space whenever. During this time, I also decided to pursue my own stationery line. I decided to do this on Etsy. I wanted to create some really fun paper goods, and I was already designing a lot of custom wedding invitations. I was doing a lot of birthday invitations, birth announcements, holiday cards, and really just doing all of this stationery for friends, family, sorority sisters, co-workers, what have you. And I really wanted to be able to design my own products. I had a lot of fun just kind of making these things that I wanted to make. So I had like notepads. It really was like an opportunity to have all this creative freedom to just do whatever I wanted and put it out there. So like I was saying, I did notepads, I did gift tags, I did chalkboards and garden stakes, and yeah, it was just really fun. I did a couple markets, and that was great. But admittingly, during this time, I was also kind of struggling. I was freelancing, but it wasn't really that consistent. I still needed to keep my day jobs, and my day jobs, I was feeling like I wasn't really creatively fulfilled in a lot of them. And to be honest, I really wasn't enjoying the markets. I did this for about 6 months and realized how brutal Florida is in the heat, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I kind of gave up, and I started to see a lot of this too. I started to see a lot of this DIY, how-to hand lettering, and it started to become where I would send out proposals, and there was always someone who could do it more, you know, who could do it cheaper, or they knew a friend who could probably figure it out. I felt like there was not enough value in hand lettering. The competition was also really high, and I was spending a lot of time and hours in these projects, and I just felt like they weren't being appreciated. So I really wanted to make a shift. I decided to do a complete reset and just kind of take a break from lettering, take a break from freelance, and really shift into agency. And honestly, I really love it. I really loved it. It was probably the hardest that I ever worked. I was working really long hours, and I had really quick turnaround times, and there was changes last minute all the time. But I loved just what I was doing, and the work that I was creating just felt really fulfilling. I was able to bring my strengths in typography and illustration to the table, and I was able to create social media graphics and be able to create blog posts and email newsletters. And we did these a lot for current events, whether they were cultural or political, and it really taught me how to be able to use art as a way to take a stance or make a statement or raise awareness. I also really learned a lot about how branding is way more than just a logo. We spent a lot of times really reviewing client questionnaires, creating audience personas, and just really developing very strategic brand strategies to be able to bring these brand identities to life. So I really just love this because it involved me being it required me being involved in the conceptual part of design. I felt like when I was with lettering, many times an art director would reach out and they would say, hey, this is what we want. We want it in this style and we want it in this space. So it was very limiting. They kind of already knew what they wanted. At first, I really loved that, but as I got deeper into my career, I wanted to have the space to be able to explore and dive deeper and create work that was more intentional. And through the research that we were finding in a lot of these projects, I was able to create with intention because I was creating for a specific purpose or for a specific tone or for a specific reason. I also got to work with clients in various industries like the pet industry, food and beverage. I did a lot of beauty, and it really helped me learn to adapt my style accordingly so that it was appropriate for that specific project and that audience, but also so that a little bit of me would always exist in the project that I was working on. So one of the industries that I probably worked with the most was real estate. At both of the agencies that I worked at, I developed brand identities for various properties, and I really love this because there was a lot of moving parts. You know, there was digital, there was print, there was experiential, and it just really allowed me to be able to develop a little bit more of a range. However, in 2020, I did lose my job. It was like the height of the pandemic and everybody was searching for jobs. I felt like I didn't know when I was going to be able to get a job. So I decided to really start freelancing again, but this time do it a little bit differently. I really wanted to focus on brand identity and website designs, and I really just got my stuff together. I spent time, meeting with an attorney, and I registered my business. I redid a lot of my contracts. I hired an accountant, and I set up my system so that my process was a little bit more seamless. It was a little bit more just automated so that I can spend more time focusing on the creative and not so much on the parts that I wasn't really familiar with or felt uncomfortable with, like invoicing and, I don't know, all the other stuff that's not creating. But I actually really, during this time, became really active on social media. And I started really just creating things just for fun, really just whatever I wanted, and the colors that I wanted. There was no restrictions now that I wasn't working for an agency. I was just doing whatever I wanted to do. And it really started to resonate with people. I felt like I started to gain some traction online, and some people started reaching out, really wanting to connect with me and work with me. And I would say that for the first time, I was actually able to kind of hold my own as a freelancer for the first time. I started to work with businesses that just really were aligning more with me and my brand and my style. So in 2021, I started freelancing full time and I launched KBCS. And in this time, I feel like there was a big surge of entrepreneurs who needed branding. A lot of my first clients were people who were starting their businesses, or they had been in business for a while and they were starting to take it a little bit more seriously. So one of those initial first clients was Jadi Collado. So Jadi is a certified fitness instructor and lifestyle content creator. She specializes in high energy dance and cycling, and she really blends her fitness expertise with her Afro-Latina swag and style to really create an environment that really helps women kind of get moving and feeling like themselves again. So a lot of the inspiration for this brand really came from airbrush lettering and sign painting that is really common in a lot of Latin American businesses. I really wanted her brand to represent her and her identity, but also to be really energetic and full of life. So the color palette for this was I wanted it to be really dynamic and eye-catching. There was something too about her flag, the Dominican flag, being red and blue, and just wanting to combine red and blue to create purple and have this palette of purples for her brand. We also did a couple of hand-lettered typography icons, and these were a couple of what I like to call Jari-isms, which are just things that she would say in her classes, in her content, just really hyping people up. So I wanted to make sure that we included these so that she can use them for graphics or for any kind of marketing. And really just pairing all of that fun with typography that felt playful and friendly, but was also still really clear and functional. I also created these little abstract illustrations of Jadi just cycling or dancing, her curls just waving in the air. And I used these as a foundation to be able to make these really expressive patterns that she could use for a variety of items, whether it was the covers for the playlist for her classes, or if it was for merch or anything like that. Another project that we were very fortunate to work with is with Target. It was actually really funny how this came about. The art director DM'd me on Instagram, which I'm trying to be more open with nowadays, but it really just threw me off because she was just like, hey, love your stuff. I work for Target. And I had to Google her because I was like, really? Do you work for Target? I don't know. But it was all right. And she did work for Target. And they had reached out to me because they wanted to create these like really playful and youthful t-shirt designs for their Ava and Viv line. So we really wanted to focus on creating some body positive statements with really bold typography and some really fun color combos. And it was really cool to be able to see this in stores, just to be able to kind of, again, see your work in the wild. I don't think that will ever go away as far as the excitement to be able to see it. It was really cool to have all my friends buying the tees and sharing pictures of them wearing it. But it was really awesome. And because of the success of this run, they signed me up for another project. So they really wanted to have me on board to be able to design the t-shirt designs for a holiday pajama. And they really wanted this holiday pajama to be really specific to the Latinx community. So I designed this concept, this hand lettering concept, again, inspired by a lot of the bodegas in my neighborhood growing up. Whenever the holiday season would come about, they would do all this like sign painting and illustrations on the glass windows. And I felt like that was like the mark of the holiday season. So I really wanted to bring that element from my story, from my past, into these designs. And it was really cool because I got to be featured on the website. The tags had my name. It was shared by New York Magazine, and it was worn by LeJuan James, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with him, but he's a local Hispanic comedian and content creator, and it was really cool to see his video with my t-shirt on it. And my entire family, you know, they also showed support, and they rocked the tees too. One of our most recent projects, I would say, has been with PepsiCo. In collaboration with them, I got to work with the wonderful Kelly Romano, and she's just amazing. So I got to work with her and her team to develop the visual identity for Jefa Owned. So Jefa Owned is a national campaign powered by PepsiCo's Juntos Crecemos initiative to really drive visibility and shine light on Latina small business owners in the food and beverage industry. So the campaign already had a logo that needed some revisions, but they were looking to have an entire visual identity campaign developed for this platform. So this was the original logo, and it just had a lot of inconsistencies. It had a lot of jagged edges, and it also needed to be used in conjunction with the Umbrella Brands logo, the Juntos Crecemos logo. But currently, as it stood, it read as one single statement, Jefa Owned Juntos Crecemos. So what I did was I just went ahead and cleaned up a lot of the inconsistencies, refined some of the shapes, and really adjusted the size of the word owned and the Juntos Crecemos logo just to better define the hierarchy between the two logos and to be able to create a little bit better of a balance. So the concept for this visual identity was called Raíces, and it really just brought a lot of inspiration from traditional Latin American motifs, like traditional textiles and like folklore dresses and tile patterns to really create these like new reimagined patterns and elements that created a sense of like familiarity and just pride for our own unique culture. The color palette also really had to work with the Umbrella brand. So we curated a palette that was really vibrant and bold and just captured this overall sense of pride, positivity, resilience and empowerment that we were really trying to achieve. To offset some of the really brighter color palette and also just this perfectly imperfect illustrative style that we were kind of going for, we went with a more traditional serif typeface for headlines, and it was something that still felt a little bit modern, but had a couple of unique glyphs that really stood out to me, and I really wanted to pair it with something clean, legible, and approachable sans serif that we could use for body copy. So we developed a variety of brand assets, whether it was patterns, shapes, borders, illustrations that were fun and they felt familiar, but they also felt fresh and unique. And it really allowed us to create a wide range from functional to expressive for the brand. We also provided creative direction for the photography. So the OG photography just really felt really dark and serious. It had these women in stereotypical power poses, and I just felt like we could approach this with a more authentic approach, really kind of go for something that felt positive and had these vibrant colors and just had more bold contrasts and just really helped unify the brand a little bit better. So overall, we were able to demonstrate how all these pieces could really work together and just really bring the campaign to life. We were able to showcase how the brand worked on multiple channels, and overall, really proud of how this came about. I hope that we'll be able to see it soon, but really wanted to be able to share it with everybody. To wrap this project up, we also had to develop a really comprehensive brand guide because not only was it going to be used by PepsiCo, but it was also going to be used by PepsiCo's partners, whether PR or marketing. So we had to develop something that was not only just curated to the new visual identity, but also provided a lot of guidance as far as instructions on how to use the brand, how to not use the brand, so that the team, both internal and external, felt confident making any kind of marketing materials for the brand. So in conclusion, did I speed through that? I'm so sorry if I did, but I can see the relation as far as why I was selected to talk for this month's theme, Vibrant. But funny enough, I've actually never considered myself a really vibrant person. I'm sure everybody has seen this meme of those houses in LA. I actually was able to go visit and take a picture of these two houses so that I can create my own memes. But I actually feel like my personality, my actual personality, doesn't really match my vibrant style. I know that my dress and work might say otherwise, but I do feel like if there is a character that I can relate to, I feel like I can relate the most to Daria Morgendorfer. And some of you might be familiar, some of you might not, but she was the main character in the show Daria, and she was sarcastic, cynical. She was a teenage girl, and she was a little nerdy, and because of her like really deadpan, monotone personality, she was sometimes cast as an outsider. But I thought she was hilarious. And I loved that she was committed to staying true to herself and never really tried to fit into the mold into what everyone else was doing. Personally, myself, I'm shy. I am an INFJ, if you know what that means. I'm a homebody. I'm an introvert. Like I said, I'll stay home for days, not talking to anyone. That's just who I am. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that just because I am these things doesn't mean that I can only be these things. I can also be expressive and bold and full of energy in a way that feels right for me. And I have been able to do that through art and through design and through creating. So I've really been able to embrace the things that make me different and instead see that as the things that make me unique. I've also been able to adapt and fail and grow and start over in my career many times. But my story and my journey is what has made me into the designer that I am today. And I'm pretty damn proud of that. So thank you, everyone.
What was it like working with the photographers? Did you like send sketches in, or were you like
Your question is, what was it like working with photographers?
yeah, like did you send sketches in, like here's what we're thinking, or were you like in like the shoot environment?
For the Jefa Owns campaign, so they haven't done the photography campaign yet, but in the past when I have worked with photographers, we do kind of provide a little bit of guidance. So we'll provide mood boards, we provide shot lists, we provide just like overall direction that we want to go with, and we'll usually have a meeting with the photographer initially just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then usually for the photo shoots or video shoots, I am present to make sure that everything is going according to plan, that we're staying true to the campaign, and that we're on time, which is also really hard. Thank you. Sure.
How critical for you is it to have the accurately tailored questions for the client questionnaires in order for you to deliver?
How accurate is it
I
for me
mean,
to
yeah,
have?
like do you, I think I always ask the speakers this, but like I use ChatGPT to try to like tailor a very unique customer client like profile list to get exactly what I want. Like what's your workflow for something like that?
Yeah.
Kind of have something already like definitively made or?
Yeah, so the question is, what kind of questions do I have prepared for a client? We do have a set of questions that we do ask every client, and it's quite an in-depth questionnaire. It goes into just basic specifics as far as like their general needs, what do they need from the project, what are they looking for as far as their branding objectives. But then we go into very specific, almost like brand personality type of questions. So I'll ask questions like, if your brand walked into a bar, what drink would it order? What would it be wearing? What kind of music would it be listening to? Because I feel like that really gives me an idea of the vibe that they want to go for. And I feel like the system has really worked for me. It is a combination of the questions that I picked up as I worked in agency, as well as my own questions that I have added now at this point to.
Like that, the bar one was cool.
Yeah. I feel like everyone always loves those kind of questions because they get to really put in these like really crazy answers. I've gotten like, I asked like, who would you party with, dead or alive? And some people would say Bob Marley, some people would say Marilyn Monroe. You know, like they just give these celebrities that really kind of give me an idea of their personality. Sure? Yeah.
Just quick, even though I'm not involved in graphic design, what kind of tips or advice would you give to anybody, students either focusing graphic design or wanting to pursue that as either a career or a hobby, just in terms of either what you've learned or what you've learned?
Yeah, so the question is, any tips that I would give to anybody interested in graphic design? I would say to just be open to the opportunities that come about. Sometimes you may find yourself in roles that you're maybe didn't think that you would be in, or that you feel like you're not happy with or something, but I always have noticed that every single role is a learning experience to be able to take on to a next role. There's always something that you learn that you're able to kind of pull out. I mean, even in the there was a time where I actually worked for Rifle for like 2 weeks, Rifle Paper Company, and I was just assembling invitations. And that actually I was able to take to my first real graphic design job where I was assembling invitations. So I would say if you're interested in graphic design, really kind of practice, do courses online, go to school if you'd like to or not, and just be open to the opportunities that come about. Let your style evolve with time, and stay positive. Sure.
How do you balance your passion, so design, art, with the business side of things, right? Because at the end of the day, this is your livelihood. So how do you keep your passion going and doing what you want to do, but also temporarily you need this to make money and
Yeah.
live life?
So the question is, how do I balance passions and the business side of design? It's very tough. I still struggle with it, to be honest. I've always struggled with the business side of design because I just really love creating and I don't want to spend time doing all the, in my opinion, boring stuff. But you kind of have to. When you're a business owner, you really have to spend time. And so I actually just heard something that was really interesting and I want to start applying it in my life. If you can't avoid it, make the best of it. And so that's what I try to do. I kind of try to make the best of a lot of the business part of, I do also kind of give myself a bit of a structure so that I do have allocated time where I am creating and allocated time where I'm spending on marketing or invoicing or anything like that. Yeah, sometimes it requires long hours, but sometimes it's also not. So there is also that balance of seasons. It's a very fluctuating industry and time. So I guess that's how I balance it. I don't know if I answered your question.
Sure. I have a question that's kind of piggybacking off that. And I know you were talking earlier about when you set up your design business and then you wanted to kind of automate that customer front end part. I'm noticing online that there's a lot of like these programs that people are selling to kind of automate that. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to whether or not you took one of those programs or classes and what very specific like programs you're using to facilitate that business part.
Yeah. So the question is, what programs do I use to facilitate my systems and processes? And currently I use a program called Dubsado. There's a lot of programs out there. I know people use Honeybook and Monday and all these other programs. I really think it comes down to preference and needs, what you specifically need from the company. I started off with Dubsado because that was really common at the time, and now I'm so deep in it that I kind of feel like to switch is a little heavier than I want to get into. But I so far love it. I feel like I've been able to automate a lot of the things that I used to spend a lot of time in. I used to spend a lot of time with emails. I still do sometimes, but I think I would get very overwhelmed with how I was responding to clients. And so by creating these or initial clients. So by creating these workflows, these systems, I was able to kind of work on it once and let it kind of work for every single lead. So yeah, I'd recommend it. It's not the most like, you can't make it all cute and designy, which is really hard as a designer, but it has enough where I can work with it.
Do they have classes with Dubsado?
I think they might. I did teach myself, but there are actually a lot of people online that will set up systems for you that they really kind of just work with you on what your needs are and they set everything up. Yeah, sure.
Do you still make personal work, or do you feel like the work that you're doing now kind of fulfills that for you?
Do I still do personal work, or do I feel like the work now still fills my cup? I still do personal work. Whether I share it as much, I think is a different story. I think I do feel like a lot of my creative juices and energy does get devoted to my clients. Unfortunately, because I'm working with clients that I feel like I really align with, I'm able to find that satisfaction through my work. So I would say my passion work, my fun projects that I do on my own, they're definitely a little bit fewer and far between, but they still happen. I feel like I'm still creative, and even like recently I had a surgery and I was creating these like comic illustrations based off of my experiences with the surgery, how I was before, and it's therapeutic almost just to still be able to create without the intention of having to sell or give to a client or put in a gallery or anything like that. So yeah, I still recommend keeping that. Sure.
Do you plan on bringing files out word selling stationery again?
Do I plan on selling stationery again? No. It was really fun. I think I loved working, like I said, with paper and print, but I think I would if I had maybe like a partner to be involved. I didn't like the logistics of it all, just having to like pack and ship. And I know that there's a lot of things now that do that for you. So I have maybe considered it a couple times, but I just don't feel like I have the capacity to do it anymore, unfortunately. Yeah.
How do you pick your clients? You said you like to online, when you're done, do you work with, do you have a checklist, or have you ever encountered occasions where you're like, nope, or
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so the question is, how do I get my clients that align with me? And I would say I do have a bit of a filtering process. I have the long questionnaire. I ask a couple questions when people reach out just to kind of gauge the type of business that they are. It also helps me filter out the people who are not that serious and who don't want to maybe just like reached out for funsies and then aren't really committed. But through that process, I'm able to learn a lot about the business, about what they do. I'm able to research them, and if I feel like they are someone that aligns with my style, or at least that they're open to my style and that they're someone I want to support, definitely I would move forward. I do have a bit of a list of qualifications. I always prioritize people of color, small businesses, businesses owned by women. So if those come about, I will always put those first. But yeah, that's kind of how I go through. I have a lot of questionnaires, I ask a lot of questions initially before I ever even meet with anybody, so that I make sure that they are the right fit. There'll still be the occasional no-shows sometimes, but fortunately those are few and far between. Sure.
Before you said that you moved to North Carolina, I have a friend who's about to move there now. Do you have any advice for anybody that's trying to get into like the art community there, or like jobs? And do you remember the name of the agency that you worked for down there, by any chance?
So your question is if I have if I know the agency I worked with in North Carolina, and any recommendations for anyone moving there. And I would say recommendations. So Charlotte has a really big beer community. So I would say if you really are into like beer and breweries, really get into that. Not saying you should drink alcohol or anything like that for work, but I do feel like that's kind of the community there. So really kind of working with maybe those businesses, or with agencies that probably will design for breweries. The agency that I had worked with at the time was called Plaid Penguin, but the art director that I worked with at the time, she's no longer there, and she's opened up her own agency, and that one's called Made Outside. So there are a couple of really cool agencies out there doing some cool stuff, but I would say a lot of their work is really food and beverage. I feel like is really big out there.
Thank you. If you're comfortable sharing, when you're determining your rates and how you want to charge and interact with clients, how do you go about that and setting boundaries to maintain like a work-life balance?
Yeah, so determining rates, how do I go about that, and how do I have a work-life balance? So I feel like when I made this transition to go from agency to my own studio, I knew that I wanted to work with people that aligned with me regardless of the rate. So I did decide on my own hourly rate, and I will give a project quote based off of that. I also have packages, which makes it a lot easier because I don't have to go through the whole calculating. A lot of people need a lot of the same things, and it's easier to just kind of give them an all-in-one package and maybe adds a few items a la carte that I can kind of price out individually. So I've set a rate that's just comfortable for me, that works for me, that I want. And I think at first I was always scared that people wouldn't pay. I was like, who's gonna pay this much? And you'll still talk to the occasional people. Like, honestly, I tell my sister my rates and she's like, who's paying that? And I'm like, well, you'd be surprised. A lot of people will do it. Gotta love family. But yeah, just deciding on what's comfortable for you. And as far as the balance, I've been doing this a while, where I kind of have figured out where my high seasons are and my low seasons are. So I kind of, on my high seasons, I'm working a lot. I'm, planning accordingly for my slower seasons, so that my slower seasons, I maybe spend a little bit less time with client work, and I'm spending more time with building my business, or traveling, or taking pottery class like I'm doing now. Yeah.
You talked about being an INFJ, maybe a more low-key personality. What are the strengths of that you feel like you bring to being an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a great question. What strengths do I bring in from being an INFJ? I would say I'm very intuitive. I think that's also from my Cancer sun. I would say I'm very empathetic, and I really listen to people and their desires and their wishes. I ask these questions in the questionnaire, but when I do meet with clients for the first time, I dive deeper into these questions. Like, tell me more about why Marilyn Monroe? I want to know more and really understand where they're coming from, their perspective, so that I'm able to create with intention and create in a way that's accessible for them. So I would say that those are the strengths. I really just like to listen and create something that not only am I proud of, but that they feel really happy and fulfilled with. Yeah, thanks. Sure.
How do you keep yourself organized? Like, I know you have this schedule.
Yeah. How do I keep myself organized? I wish I could tell you. I really am not organized. I'm not a morning person. What I've tried to do as I've gotten older and as I've had my business is that I've had to almost be overly scheduled. You know, like if you look at my calendar, my entire day is in blocks. Whether I follow it or not, different story. I try really hard, but it helps me, like I said earlier, just kind of have specific time for business items, specific time for clients, specific time for lunch and watching TV, and then specific time for working again. And I've been able to create that structure just based off of trial and error. At first I was like, oh, I'm gonna do creative work from 9 to 12. And then I started doing that. I was like, I can't. I like to have a really slow morning. I like to enjoy my coffee and kind of look at inspiration in the morning. And then I noticed that after lunch, that's when I'm really kind of, maybe because I feel like the day's ending and I'm really like on it. So it really is just trial and error. And I've had to do that to try to give myself a little bit of structure. But I don't consider myself a very organized person, unfortunately. Yes.
We have time for one more question.
How do you find your inspiration? What inspires you to create the designs that you do come up with?
Sure. So the question is how I find inspiration. I would say I find inspiration everywhere. I really don't, there's the go-to places, Pinterest and the internet, but I actually find a lot of inspiration through traveling. Whenever I travel, I like to go antiquing. I like to go vintage shopping and go to record stores and thrifting. And I feel like I find a lot of my inspiration in those areas, just kind of looking at packaging and anything that I can find. Also, just like in the wild, as I'm traveling in nature, if there's like texture on the floor, there's a tile that I like. My camera roll is filled with like images that I just keep for reference for later. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But that's usually where I find inspiration. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.